Starting recording, and we'll start now. Give it just a moment while folks log in. All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Jessica from Greenlight, and we are thrilled to host tonight's event with author Quiara Alegría Hudes, presenting her new book, My Broken Language. She's going to be talking tonight with Daphne Rubin-Vega, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Quiara, Daphne, and the team at One World for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces right now, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Now, a couple housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see and hear you. They can see that you're here though, and you can see a count of fellow attendees on the top of your Zoom screen. There are a couple different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like a speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And importantly, tonight's featured book, My Broken Language, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person at our bookstore locations 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day of the week, and you can purchase Quiara's book and many others on site. Or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. I'll drop the buy link in the chat in a moment. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. So, some introductions. Our interviewer tonight is Daphne Rubin-Vega. She can next be seen in the upcoming feature film In the Heights, playing Daniela. She shot the Netflix series Social Distance and Same Storm, the newest Peter Hedges film, during the early months of COVID. A staple of the New York theater community, Daphne earned a Tony nomination for her portrayal of Mimi in the original cast of Rent, and another for Anna in the Tropics. Daphne was Luisa Lopez on Katie Keene, the CW spinoff, Riverdale, and on the Netflix series Tales of the City. She starred in the musical Miss You Like Hell at the Public Theater and in the one-woman show Empanada Loca, which was written for her. She helped adapt the play into the scripted podcast The Horror of Dolores Roach, which is currently in pre-production. She's going to be speaking tonight with our featured author, Quiara Alegría Hudes. Quiara is the author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning Quiara is the Pulitzer-winning playwright of Water by the Spoonful. And with collaborator Lin Manuel-Miranda, she wrote the Tony Award-winning Broadway musical In the Heights and the film adaptation hitting screens this June. Her notable essays include High Tide of Heartbreak in American Theater Magazine and Corey Couldn't Take It Anymore in The Cut. In opposition of the carceral state, Hudes and her cousin founded Emancipated Stories, a platform where people behind bars can share one page of their life story with the world. As a barrio feminist and joyous mischief maker, Quiara y su hermana created the Latinx Casting Manifesto. Hudes is a native of West Philly, USA, and now lives with her family in New York. Her new book, My Broken Language, tells her story of coming of age against the backdrop of an ailing Philadelphia barrio with her sprawling Puerto Rican family as a collective muse. The book has been praised by such celebrated writers as Lin Manuel-Miranda, Lynn Nottage, and Angie Cruz, who says Quiara Alegría Hudes is a bona fide storyteller about the people she loves, especially the women in her family, who cook, talk, light candles, and conjure the spirits. Enormously empathetic and funny, My Broken Language is rich with unflinching observations that bring us in close without cloaking the details. The language throughout is gorgeous and so moving. I love this book. So you are in for something really special tonight. Quiara is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then she'll be talking with Daphne and then with all of you. So Quiara, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Hello to my sister, hermana, Daphne. This is such a blessing and such a treat. It's going to be really special. I think a lot of you have joined tonight in particular somewhat out of interest to check out and find out about my new book, but also out of interest in the collaboration that Daphne and I have shared over many years, which has turned into an artistic sisterhood. So here's how I thought we could roll tonight. I thought that I'd start reading two very brief passages that are particularly geared toward Daphne. Then she and I could be in conversation about the book for a little while. She and I thought we would share a special reading together, read a passage from the book together before we get it to the Q&A. So a few steps to tonight. And please, for the Q&A, put your questions in the little Q&A button, and no need to just address them to me. They can be addressed to Daphne as well. She'll participate in that section also. Okay, so let's see. Now that we're all here, hi, Daphne. You know, I've read a lot of passages from this book, from My Broken Language, on this tour, and I thought, well, let me start with something to kind of center us in the words. This is a book about women. It really, really is about women. And my work with Daphne is also about women. But I kept thinking of intimacy, and actually I decided to read a short passage that is about a man, because it's about intimacy between a man and a woman. And it reminded me of some of the roles Daphne has played in my plays and stuff. So this is about a page and a half from a chapter called Sedo Buys Me an Upright Language of Bach. I was 8 when Sanchez first appeared. The second Mom brought him home, I was on alert. Man brought an earthquake. The blackout drunk rages at 3 a.m. Mom stripped his pants, tugging at the ankles, and washclothed the shit away as he hollered and cursed. I would spy these struggles from the upstairs landing. My jaw would clench with animal instinct, and I'd despise the devil in his voice. I tried transmitting instructions telepathically. Forget him, Mom. Let him clean his own shit. No matter how loudly I thought, Mom never seemed to hear. One rainy night, I found trash bags out front filled with his nice clothes. Where's Sedo, Mom? Straightening up or getting out. The following morning, the bags were gone. The house quieted that week, as if listening for clues. Mom was tense for days, vague with the answers. She gripped my arm whenever near, as if to steady herself from stumbling. She offered unsolicited assurances. We will be fine no matter what happens. You gotta believe in your mommy, ¿me entiendes? She was shoulder length from heartbreak, hollowed out, teetering. She had lost love once, and it had nearly annihilated her. Would I watch her plummet again? Finally, she was pulling onto the Schuylkill. The on-ramp from West Philly was a treacherous blind merge with cars zooming by on her left and an impatient line accumulating behind her. If a gap slipped by unclaimed, angry hunks pounced like wolves. What do you want me to do, fly? She screamed in the rear view. She swooped into a lane, and in that moment, out came her decision. What I had to figure out is if I'm ready to put in the time. I'm not young, Quiara, and this is a major project, an investment of my best years. Cleaning up a man is no 1, 2, 3 quickie, but with all his imperfections, and now her voice cracked. When all I had around me was death. She trailed off, leaving me to infer what death she referred to. I knew. It was the shroud that fell on her in those skinniest days. I had watched my mother erode. Being a brown woman battling a white man in family court, Dad's threats to kidnap me to California, Caso Comadre being destroyed when and because it flourished. When all I had around me was death, Mom steadied her voice. Sedo said, get on your knees and give that to the universe. I tell you, that was a powerful moment in my life. I will die thinking of it. He returned me to faith. When Sedo resurfaced the next day, a chastened hush arrived with him. What Mom anticipated as a years-long process, cleaning him up, he had begun to accomplish, it seemed, in those few days away. As time wore on, the temperance proved lasting. It's not that he had shrunk, but he came back home with a sense of permission and humility. I wondered if, by drawing a firm line, Mom had made good on her spiritual debt. If in his darkest hour, she had restored him to his self. So that's a heavy way to start this time together, but that intimacy, and I should add, it's such a kind of painful and raw piece about my pop, who I came to call him Pop, and you know, we're very, very close. So I think he trusts me being public about such a private matter because of our closeness. So with that said, hi, Daphne.
Hi, am I on?
Yes, there you are.
Hi. Oh my God, I love that passage. I love that passage because I love your language, but it illustrates how a form of surrender to what is, and what is really, really bleak and painful, and to surrender to that state can sometimes create the vacuum or the gear shift that allows one to be lifted. Almost, yeah, it was her spiritual recompensa, right? Payback.
Yeah. There's a chapter leading up to that where it talks about my mother being in the throes of spiritual possession. Se montó el espíritu, the spirit met her. And I had never seen anything like that. I was a child when it happened, and it shocked me because she was transformed. She was a transformed human, and she was speaking in a different voice and in a different language than I had ever heard. And when the spirit leaves her, it's kind of like a violent moment in her body, like she thrusts up and he catches her. So I saw that catch, and that was impressive. And I thought, he can catch my mom. Not a lot of people can do that because she's a lot of woman.
It takes titans, and titans, like we were discussing earlier, aren't, you know, when they get out of sorts, they get out of sorts. You know, that's the kind of energy that happens, you know. It's not tidy, it's not pretty sometimes, but the need to come to an equal place and take the advantage in the best ways of what each other has to give, you know.
It reminds me, Daphne, of the reason I was reading through that, and I was like, you know, this reminds me of Daphne because the roles that you've played in my work, it's like, how does a woman stand in her integrity in the real world, not in the Instagram, like we can say beautiful things and be healthy and well very easily world, but in the real world that is a compromised world, and in which people's pain collides together, you know. And I feel like the characters that you play in my plays and musicals, they have these issues. They have to decide, you know, how to love and how to safely love and how to self-protect.
Yeah, and they're very aware of their the way they shape-shift in the world in order to protect themselves and their interests, their love, you know, in order to, yeah, and how they do and don't shape-shift. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You can pull that off. That's why I've always liked working with you. You and my mom are very different, very, very different people. But there is a little overlap in.
Also, your mom has my mother energy too. Like we come from the same mother, kind of that energy, the almost superhuman that can come up when there's a need. But anyway, I interrupted you. What were you saying about your mother versus, well, the shape shifting is different.
just the ability to live fully in multiple and sometimes conflicting realities all at once. That is familiar to me. I see that, you know, and not only is it familiar to me, it's exciting to me because if I didn't live, this is what I saw my matriarchs do, and this is what I had to do. And if I didn't live fully in multiple realities at the same time, it would be like cutting an arm off.
That's right.
You know, like being mixed, being
That's right.
not from here, not from there, being bilingual, but in a kind of failed and not great way.
Yeah, like the incompletion. It's like, no, it's actually, you know, when people say, well, you can't, you know, the mind can't occupy two thoughts. And sometimes I think, yeah, it can, you know, like, and it can occupy many. I mean, you can fight me on that, but I think that there's a, you know, like the atom has many orbits to keep it together. I think that when we have the blood that we have, you know, and the ancestry, you know, survival of the fittest, I don't know what it is. And it can turn against you. It can, you have to make a decision. You know, the thing about finding faith is like, sometimes the only way to navigate is to have something that's higher than what's on this earth and what we think we see and believe in, you know?
Yes.
I think that we definitely have that in common.
Yes. Before we talk about other things with the book, do you feel comfortable? I feel very moved to ask you, because this book is in part, My Broken Language is in part, in large part, about my mother and the other matriarchs that were in my life on her side of the family. It's also about my journey, you know, about my teachers. It's about a lot of things, and it's about my journey through language. And my mother was one of the primary teachers of language. But while we're on this topic of motherhood, before we talk about other stuff in the book, Daphne, I feel very moved to ask, do you want to share a little bit about like your own mother's life and path? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
No. I mean, if it's helpful to contextualize, I lost my mother very young. But in a way it was like, you know, I was born in Panama, in another country, and I came here, my mother and father, my mother was a Black Latina, and my father was, you know, just a Panamanian Latino of like mostly, you know, that European and, you know, indigenous descent. So, you know, it was always a myth about, you know, certain people in, you know, Papa's family shunned my mother because of the color of her skin, which was sort of said very, you know, in a passé sort of fashion, and how in retrospect we absorbed that passéness, you know, but she, and for her to divorce him and then come here, leave us with her sister, which is a total immigrant story. And then, you know, because my uncle worked for the embassy. So giving me a better life that she couldn't have while she went and like learned nursing in the United States, because her nursing, which was highly qualified in Panama, didn't rate in the United States. So having to double and then sending for us legit. I have two older brothers, and, you know, kind of like that moment where she got married to my stepfather, an American, you know, of Eastern European Jewish descent, like, who adopted us. Like once we got everyone together, she died of cancer. And so it was like watching sort of a goddess perform magic and then like expire, you know, just, so that was sort of like the mythology that I think that I created around my mother, because no one could be her. But, you know, now that I'm a mother and and older than my mother ever got to be, I see, just the disparity between what some people call life and what people call superhuman endeavor. It was almost like she had to see the unseen to navigate the world. Or had to plug into, rather, seeing the unseen is so vague, but to really plug further into a faith that was not validated in the spaces around her, and really get in there, because to not do that would be to cut off pieces of her limbs, and I think that I observed, and learned to, maybe like borrow, to take away pieces of myself, and the cost to that. She always taught me, like, don't ever be ashamed of your body, the way you speak, the way you dance, the way, and don't ever be ashamed of speaking to me in Spanish, which was like, eye roll, that I see, like if I didn't answer her. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Love it. It's just nice to start with mother.
Yes.
So that we're artistic sisters. So
yes.
That generation to this.
Yes.
So thank you. I love to share her story here too tonight.
Well, that's also what bonded us, because I came to you with my writings about my mother, and Quiara listened. I mean, I think that, our first meeting was sort of a FaceTime with a 2-hour long rapt attention. It was rapt attention, and what is intimacy? Like, that was intimacy, anyway, yeah.
So what else should we talk about in the book? Tell me, you read it an early draft. It's not all super heavy. It's not all super,
no.
A lot of playfulness and stuff too.
No, yes, of course it's playful. I mean, and your style is like what I lovingly call, the hot and cold shower. It's like, there's always a gear shift. We never stay in a low point, which is very emblematic of how we live our lives. It's like, no, man, time to move. Like, let's go. Let's keep it going. But also honoring that sometimes we have to gestate, we have to hibernate, we have to pause longer than we think is necessary. It's funny, Tommy and my husband, my husband and son are coming in, and while I was reading the book, I would read passages to Tommy, and he was so excited about his identification as a son of immigrants who went to Yale and had that like, oh my God, I've arrived, and like, here I get to be a student of this incredibly validated institution. And then, how that turned around and had a bar, like had a sting, there was a sting to your experience, and how, I don't know what to say about that, but how we can measure those things against our own lives. And no matter what our experiences are, there's an absolute identification, and I mean, what I love about your book is that it's not sugarcoating, it's not invested in happy endings. And yet it's extremely joyful. Ay alegría, like you've lived up to your revolutionary joy.
Oh, thank you. To speak to the first generation component of college going. So the book is set in my childhood, and it actually ends when I become a writer. So if you're familiar with In the Heights, if you're familiar with my stage works, Miss You Like Hell, Water by the Spoonful, the book is the part of my life that made it possible for me to tell those stories. It's not actually like a behind the scenes of my career as a writer. It's what came first. And part of that story was being first in my family, first my household to go to college. And I loved learning, and I was always a very bookish kid. My mother encouraged this habit, but she gave me books that were like not on the public school curriculum or on the Yale curriculum. You know, she was feeding me books about her lukumi practice. You know, she was feeding me books about Yoruba ritual and ceremony. You know, I hadn't really like read the ancient Greeks when I got to Yale, and a lot of my classmates had. So I'm like, okay, we had different canons, we have different literature here. And at Yale, I studied music, and there were so many highs and so many lows, and it was all together. Like in some ways, because I didn't know much about college, I was uninhibited. I was like, there's no reason why I ain't gonna rule this place, you know? But by another token, I got this cool job. These are stories that are told in the book. I got a very cool job working in the School of Music recording studio. So I got paid to set up microphones and listen to Schubert and listen to Beethoven. This was a job. And I had to earn some serious money to pay for my books and stuff. You know, so that was such a high. And I even described one experience where I'm listening to Schubert, and it's like, not literally, but like emotionally and spiritually, it's like orgasmic. The sonata form, it blows my mind. It's like tantric. But by
right, it just keeps...
yeah, because it keeps unfurling and unfolding. And just when you think you're there, just when you think you're like, yes, give me that final recapitulation, like it goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
There's a lot of foreplay with the Schubert sonata, piano sonata in A major. But by the same token, there were all these schools of aesthetics I had no prior access to. I didn't know what being atonal was. I didn't know who Schoenberg was. I didn't know what a 12-tone row was. And they were like, do not mention Stevie Wonder in this classroom. Do not mention that Música Jíbara. That is not for here. So I had to juggle all those things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had to juggle which language is mine. I got better and better and better at the English language as I continued my education, but I also felt that the more I mastered it, the more I understood that it was not fully equipped to describe all of me, you know? So I had to find additional languages. That's where Spanish came in. That's where Yoruba came in. That's where body language and the language of the spirits came in, and all that fuses together in the end when I decide to become a writer.
Yes. And how do you persevere in in a culture that tells you that those skills are not really the skills that, you know, sell tickets you can monetize from, or will elevate you as an artist, like as if they're crayons versus, you know, another. Yeah, I mean, I
had seen, you know, I mentioned in that passage I read, it mentioned that something my mom did was called Casa Comadre, and it had folded in part maybe because it was successful. So that's a whole nother chapter in the book, and it talks about this women's health and reproductive justice community center she built in El Barrio for Boricua and Hispanic women at the time, women who spoke Spanish. And
but can I interrupt? It didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, let me, like, what can I do? It was from really observing and hearing, hearing like the truth that, you know, like seeing the unseen, what you knew, that you knew this, but you'd never heard it. Like that's the way I heard it, that she finally had confirmation of the worst kind of news and the kind of, they're not even microaggressions, but the aggressions done on the community specifically, and to actually address that and have it have success. And because of the success, I mean, that's major.
Yeah.
And to persevere.
Yeah. You know, it talks about, there's one passage where she worked for a major women's health organization downtown, where all of the management were essentially white feminists, many of them her mentors and friends, but there was a division, a very clear division between who populated management and who populated staff. The women of color were not in management, even though they were doing outreach to those communities. And so Mom was working at the Choice Hotline, and they just weren't reaching the Hispanic community at the time. And I remember being in the car and she was screaming at the top of her lungs when she had her eureka moment. She said, "They don't have fucking phones." And when she realized that a lot of the community members she was trying to reach did not have landlines. I mean, there were no cell phones then, but they just did not have phones. This is a poor community. That was it. She said, okay, who needs a phone then? And she found a community center. They gave her a room and she set up shop so people could walk in and have these conversations in person, because they weren't going to call a crisis hotline. And Daphne, I'm saying all this to circle back. Then they were very successful and they got shut down. And the community rallied behind her, but they got defunded. And Daphne, I say all this to circle back to, because you talked about notions of success. And I think seeing my matriarchs measure success, not in a kind of commercialized way or in a rags to riches way, but in a way that deals with integrity and quality of interaction, no matter how big or small scale that interaction is, that was very helpful for me. That's what helped me survive Yale and take the best from it. Yeah. And still demand that I bring my best self to Yale, and kind of have this sense that, like, I have something to offer to Yale too. They're not just giving me the goods and I'm running away from it, but I'm giving of myself to that institution.
And that's what reflects in the characters that you've written, that I have played. If there is a running thread, there's like, how do you take those tools and make the best for your community, or what you need, your objective. In the case of Beatriz, it's her daughter, like do anything. And
that's from Miss You Like Hell.
Yes, Beatriz and Miss You Like Hell. I think of Abuela Claudia in The Heights, a woman who values the things that seemingly are little, but is actually the glue of a community, in a sense.
I have to say here, I know it's very frowned upon that writers steal from themselves and recycle material, but for those who keep a close watch, there is a line, and it's been in a lot of the trailers for In the Heights, where Abuela Claudia says, actually, it might not be in the trailers, but it's in the scene. She says, "I felt like one tiny grain of sand from the beaches I left behind." She's talking to Nina about her journey from Cuba to New York. And I actually, if you do a close read of my book, that's not Abuela Claudia's original line. That's my Titi Ginny's original line. When she would tell, and it's in here, so I have stolen from my own work in that regard. And she would say,
I like that. That's an Easter egg.
It's an Easter egg, that's right. And my family members would tell me stories about their lives that were so different than mine. And Titi Ginny said, talking about when she first came to the Bronx, because there was a short stop in the Bronx before they moved to Philly. When they first got there, she said, "I felt like one tiny grain of sand from the beaches I left behind." So really, I'm not so much a writer as I am like a thief a little bit,
a chronicler.
I eavesdrop. This is how my family literally described their story to me. How am I not gonna be like, okay, Titi Ginny, hang tight for a sec, because I'm gonna go run and grab a pen, So it was only natural. Daphne, before we move to the Q&A, were you able to print those pages out?
Yeah, I have them. You know, when you started talking about the intimate relationship between a man and a, like, you know, uh, 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 two people, I thought that you were setting up what we're going to read if we have time, because it's a different kind of intimacy in a way that, like, what you focus on is those little gems of moments where you have epiphanies, right?
Yeah.
Like, and this is a big one, you know. And it's interesting, yeah, while we're looking at this, yeah, anyway, I'm gushing. And
it's true. I never thought of it that way, but in some ways the book is every little epiphany along the path to why I write what I write. And this is one of them, and it's a big one. So in the book is structured in every chapter is a different language in my life, and many of them are about music. Music was huge for me. Music saved my life. It really did. It kept me alive. It kept me feeling. It gave me a safe way to express my anguish to the world without people getting in my face about it, because Chopin will do that for you. So after I graduated from Yale, I started working as a gig musician in Philadelphia. And this is an excerpt. So what Daphne and I thought we would
little known fact, Quiara is a full, like, badass pianist, composer, and musician. Just FYI.
So this is a piece from being a gig musician in Philadelphia, and something is not feeling right. Things are going well. I'm getting a lot of good gigs, but something's not clicking. And Daphne and I thought we'd read it together. So we're going to trade paragraphs back and forth. We haven't tried this yet. So welcome to our rehearsal audience. I'm glad you joined us for tonight's rehearsal. And Daphne, I'm actually going to start the paragraph above where I marked.
Okay.
I'll just do the first one. Okay, so
yeah. Shoot.
This will be about 5 minutes, and then please we'll open up for the Q&A, Daphne or I answering your questions. Okay, so this is from the chapter called Gil Scott-Heron Asks Me a Question. The Tin Angel called. Tracy Chapman and the Indigo Girls had played between those exposed brick walls. The club was indie folk heaven. Your demo's good. It's been on my desk for a few months, waiting for the right moment, the booker said. Want to open for Gil Scott-Heron? I ran to Tower Records, found him in the bargain CDs, and discovered an unacknowledged source of half my urban idioms. The revolution will not be televised? Gil Scott-Heron's words. I had heard him, but never heard of him, quoted him without the proper citations. After sound check, I joined the old poet in the back room. There was time to kill before the house opened. The room was dim and derelict, with stuffing clouding out the sofa. Heron's unkempt silver afro and old leather blazer spoke of a guy whose ups and downs had blended into a cohesive whole. His hips were too narrow for his jeans, cheeks too gaunt for his beard. He rolled a joint, toked deep, and passed it to his conga player, then flautist. He always requested local kids to open his shows, he said. They kept him current, often sampling his work on future tracks.
He held a toke, then spread his lips and let it swirl out naturally. So what's your story? West Philly born and bred. Right on. And what are you about? What's your story? His players nodded, approving the question, waiting for their minds to be blown or simply to meet a fellow traveler. But I sat there like story was a vocab word I'd never bothered learning, as though I had no name, let alone one that broke its own rules, let alone one that meant revolution, masked as happiness. My brain felt Men in Black zapped. This cat had lost his following, his weight, and some teeth. Poetry didn't pay much, but he never lost his story. The about attached to his bones. So who are you, Quiara? Who Kiki is? ¿Quién eres? How Kiki be? Who, what, when, where, why, how? Grade school shit. And the half-breed Ivy Leaguer had nothing.
You're up, hun. I took the stage. Applause occurred. Keys were pressed. Notes emanated from vocal cords, but I felt hollow as a tree trunk with upturned roots. I listened to my songs like an operating room specimen, a spirit hovering above the bright lights, looking down at her anesthetized body. What characterized my chords and lyrics, I pondered, other than a general pleasantness? Life is nice, sometimes a bit hard. Romance feels good. That was the thesis, written all over my music, agreeable and undisruptive. My songs were a pantomime, a picket fence.
Applause happened again. A body shaped like mine left the stage. Next up, put your hands together. A conga guy perched and slapped a groove. A flautist stood and looped a hook. An old poet looked at the black, brown, and white faces between brick walls. His disheveled leather blazer brushed against the mic. A rat done bit my sister now with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell.
He was funny if salt in the sugar dish made you chuckle. He was real in a world that liked dress up, poor in a city of new glass towers, unpleasant before a camera that said wave and smile. Ordered on embarrassing, the old poet's lack of adornment, words that poked fingers in the American socket, zap, char, spark, you've been burned.
The old shame was at me again, the one that visited when I was asked if I believed in God, the one that choked me when ice cubes went clink and I smiled and nodded about the inner city problem, the old shame that loved my silence, that embraced me when I clammed up, warming me like a partner in bed. I wanted to be done with it, to venture out on my own, but without shame's evergreen love of my silence, I would speak out and freeze to death, alone in America, with no blanket to warm me. Would I speak out and freeze to death, alone in America, with no blanket to warm me?
This is not some rags to riches tale. If you skip ahead to the final chapter, you will not find me knocking on Larry Gold's studio door announcing how wrong he'd been to reject me. This is 40-something Quiara issuing an internal storm watch. This is my warning lobbed right at the mirror, that if you ask for an audience, you best have something to say. That if you have something to say, the clock is ticking on your hours left to say it. These are notes to self on a memoir I am drafting at my desk at 1:48 p.m. It is a late October afternoon. Gray and rain greet me through the window. And I type a writer's prayer with you, dear reader, as my witness. May silence, that evergreen seductress, not turn these pages too palatable. May I stand alone beneath the stage lights, honest and embarrassing as an old poet.
Yes.
That was fun, Daphne.
I love it. I love it. I love the language. I love the rawness, the humor, the implementation of also just poetry and image, you know, and nature. Anyway, yeah.
After that, I quit it all and I became a writer. And of course,
I disagree also. I think you do go to Larry Gold's door in my version. Larry Gold be like.
So if you like what you heard, please buy the book, My Broken Language. That would be wonderful, especially from the bookstore, Greenlight bookstore, that's hosting this event. And I think they're going to come back on and feed us some questions so we can hear what is on people's mind out there watching.
Yes, we do have a lot of questions. Thank you so much, especially for that reading together. I feel like I should say like amen. Like that was powerful stuff.
Amen.
All right. So we have a number of questions. We'll do them in the order they came in and see how many we can get to tonight. So the first one is from David Lowe from Wesleyan. He says, "What have you learned from each other by working together? Any new discoveries?" So this one's for both of you.
I know for me, I'm jumping in. I'm going first, Daphne.
Okay, go.
I learned that I can't pretend I can't hide my fear. My fear is real. It happens when the audience comes in every night. It's really fucking real. And I learned that because I could sense Daphne felt it too. And I learned it's helpful to just acknowledge it and process it together and to conquer it, then to get in a practice of articulating why we're doing what we're doing and that we have each other's back. That is what I've learned from Daphne Rubin-Vega.
Wow. I love it. What I've learned from, it's, I say it with a little bit of shame. I mean, only because it was something, sometimes silence is complicitness. And between a few iterations of Miss You Like Hell, I just really, I mean, what she's taught me, I think is different than what I'm saying, but that bringing me into a conversation and asking me opinions about what I thought about bigger issues of theater and our stories and how we tell our stories. I think conversations that I've learned from Quiara's boldness, playing a character that I loved fiercely. I love the characters, especially, but that I knew weren't sugarcoating and hence were perceived like I could feel all kinds of different perceptions because she wasn't written to be a safe character. Beatriz is specifically I'm thinking of in Miss You Like Hell. And what I learned from Quiara was to be true to my word and this the spirit of this human being. It wasn't a character. There wasn't a caricature. Does that, yeah. And to stay in my integrity while people are like, well, shouldn't she have done this and shouldn't she have done that? And you like, why do you call yourself a good mother if you did this? And to stay in, not try to people please or to have people like me is a priceless gift and lesson to learn as an actor,
That's great. So this is maybe a follow-up on working together. Pacey asks, what is something you both would like to collaborate on but haven't gotten the chance to yet?
Oof, I haven't even thought of it, but I always want Quiara to hold my hand with whatever I'm working on, like if it's my writing. But I don't know. You answer that.
I don't know either. This was amazing. We've never read something together. Tonight was a first. This was a first for us. When you've accomplished so much with one artist, I don't feel greedy about the future. I just feel really grateful about what we have accomplished together. And I know it's not the last time. We're also friends. We also do like a Latino wellness group together. We exist on stage, on the page, and
I call her when my heart is full. I do. I call her when my heart isn't full. I call her when I'm hungry. No, it's true. I call her as a friend and get a lot out of it. So
you love that.
Yeah.
Here's one from Miranda. Miranda asks, says, I would love to hear both of you talk about the people that taught you to honor times of grief or turbulent change through the expression of joy and creative living. And she adds, grateful for you both.
Thank you. Well, I think to reiterate, it really is a sort of, well, I can't just give it all up to the ancestors, but I think that there's something cellular about finding the joy. I think there's something definitely cultural about people who, by dint in a way of being oppressed, recognize the sacredness of joy. And so they guard it and protect it and cherish it. So I like that. That to me is very inspiring. I find that the older I get, joy is actually a form of incredible resistance.
Yes. I think that, hi, Miranda, thank you for asking this question. I love this question so much, and it really touches down into kind of some of the purpose I have found in writing this book. Actually, it makes me think of when I got inspired to write the book. When I look back on the 80s and 90s, coming of age in Philly, the community was up against a lot of hurdles. There was HIV/AIDS, there was crack cocaine, there was poverty, there was educational inequality, there was residential segregation. These things take a tremendous toll on individuals and families. My family was not shielded from these, and the amount of funerals, the amount of grief and pain, and the amount of just surviving, so you don't even have time to grieve because you have to go to school tomorrow, you have to go to work tomorrow. I didn't understand that as a child. It was very confusing and disturbing to me. And then fast forward to, I was actually in California working on a musical with Daphne, and my cousin came to visit, and he popped in an old family home video from that time. And what it was the summer, that 1991 summer, Bachata Rosa by Juan Luis Guerra.
Oh my God.
And there I am sitting on the steps, little shy Kiki, watching as my cousins are crammed into Abuela's row home like sardines. And they are dancing and sweating and so embodied, and they all dance in their own way. And some of them are very like aggressive. Some of them are very smooth and satiny. Some of them are very comical, but all connected by our bodies and by this joy. These songs are joyous and we're so happy. And I watched that and I remember what actually happened in my family in 1991. It was not an easy year. There was a lot of grief. And I said, damn, look at us dance. Look at us celebrate. How did we do that in those hard times? And that was so inspiring to me. And to be perfectly honest, like some of the criticism I've gotten as a writer is like, there's too much love, too sentimental, too many rose-colored glasses. But I saw what our joy meant. Our joy is not just, oh, life is sweet. No, our joy is we're here, damn it, and we survived. And we're going to assert our right to be joyous together and to be loving together. So that's actually that. And then I went and wrote the first chapter of the book. So that touches down with the inspiration for the book for me.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, I think we may have time for this last one. This one is from Scott. Scott says, I was fortunate to see an advanced screening of In the Heights and truly believe it is the healing movie this country needs right now. Mm-hmm. Do each of you have a favorite memory of working on the film adaptation?
Well, one favorite memory was a painfully underlit photograph that I took of Quiara because she was directing one night. She had her whole gear. She was directing because John was having a baby. And do you remember? And it was John was having a baby and we were shooting the night that Abuela Claudia passes. So there was just something so moving. But to be honest, every day was a best day on that shoot. I mean, it was magic.
That's accurate. That is not an exaggeration. It was a life highlight and a life culmination. And especially, I started writing in the Heights in my 20s before I had kids. I was new to New York. I was starry-eyed. Lin was walking me through the community. I'm pointing out there because I live in Washington Heights now. So Lin was walking me around there being like, there is this playground and here's this thing. I was a kid and I wasn't sure if I was nervous, and here were these boys, and they were all boys, and they'd been working on In the Heights for a while, and they all knew each other, and I didn't know if I was part of that club. I was behind. I always felt like I was playing catch up. By the time I wrote the screenplay for In the Heights, I knew I had earned my place, and I had had 2 children. I was a much more confident woman, and I said, okay, time for me to leave the like asking for permission aside. I'm going to write the piece I want to write and tell the story the way I want to tell it. And they have entrusted me with this because they know who I am. So I better deliver on that. And so it's just so nice to step onto the set in that stage of life, as opposed to in an earlier stage of life in which I was kind of a little sheepish and more asking for permission. And yeah, it culminated when John Chu, he had a baby, and he handed me the director's seat for that night. He handed me the director's little microphone and tablet, and I directed.
I have evidence.
That night. That was amazing to really.
That was amazing. And you know, well, we can't tell that story without saying that opening night of In the Heights on Broadway, there was. Come on, you had a baby.
I had a baby, yeah.
Everyone's having babies on very vital nights of In the Heights.
So. Yeah, so that's true. It's true. There was the Playbill article came out, you know, right after In the Heights opened off Broadway, and said, you know, that I had a child during the preview that night. So
it was preview.
I was in the audience during the preview that night. So yeah, a lot of life lived and great memories with In the Heights.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your memories, and Quiara, thank you so much for sharing this book, and Daphne for helping to open it up for us. Again, you can get My Broken Language from Greenlight. There's a link in the chat right there, and it's a great way to support authors doing great work in independent bookstores as well. So thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. Anything you want to add as we close out, as we fade?
You know, I really would be remiss, and I would kick myself if I didn't say that, albeit that I'm partial, My Broken Language is a story that is so empowering for young women, no matter, I don't think, what they look like or what their background is, but because of its specificity, I think that it's really, I don't know if YA or, you know, young adult is like a bad term, but like, I think young people should read this book. And I think if I were an educator, I would recommend this book to young people, my son's age, for example. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Daphne. And thank you, Quiara, for the book. It was a pleasure to be with both of you tonight. A joy.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Have a beautiful
good night. Take care.
Have a great evening. Take care, everyone.